everybody. Welcome to church today. Welcome to the Foothills Church of Gilroy. My name is Pastor David. I have the honor of filling in for Pastor Mark today. I'm just going to jump right into it. I don't usually start with this, but I'd like to start with a video today. So I'll let the video speak for itself, and then we'll talk about it. So please enjoy.
Are you smart?
Yeah.
Are you strong?
Yeah.
Are you brave?
Yeah.
Are you pretty?
Yeah.
Are you kind?
Not really.
All right, I saw that recently on Instagram. I sent it to my wife and we laughed and laughed. Because what I love about kids is at least they're honest. And I think sometimes we feel this way. If we're really honest about it and someone asks us, are you kind? Some of us, at least sometimes, might stop. Maybe not. Maybe not usually. So we're talking about kindness today. We've been talking about the fruit of the Spirit, which is the fruit, the produce, what God produces when His Spirit is in us. So our main text has been Galatians 5:22. So the fruit of the Spirit, the result of God in us, is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So we're moving on to the more difficult ones. I think love, we could all use more love. Joy is great. Peace, we could all use more peace. Last week we talked about patience. That one's, that's a little tougher. We're working on patience. Kindness, I have to be kind, not just in my words, but in my thoughts. That's a little tougher. Faithfulness, I have to be true to my word, for example. Self-control, even more. See, these, as we start getting a little bit further on in this list, they take a little bit work. I think like that little girl, we all know we're supposed to be kind, especially as Christians. There's a couple problems with that sometimes. One of the problems is we know ourselves. And even if we don't say something unkind, we probably very often catch ourselves thinking something unkind. I have a friend who talks about, she says that, she's a Christian, but her facial expressions are not quite saved yet. And so as she's thinking things, you can tell she's not being kind, whether she says something or not. And the problem is if we continue to let those kind of unkind or ungenerous or even mean thoughts, if we let those kind of circulate in our mind long enough, then eventually, and sometimes purposefully, we will be guilty of saying something purposefully cruel. And once we say it, we can't take it back. And I can almost guarantee every single one of us has said something unkind and regretted it immediately. Another problem is that in our culture, our culture does not always value kindness. When I was starting out one of my degrees, me and my wife were fairly newly married. We had a child on the way, and I was working full time. So I've always worked full time when I've been in school full time. So I say that to say I didn't have a lot of time to relax or to unwind. So what we'd have to do, because I'm old enough where if you watched a TV show, you had to watch it at the time slot that it came on. We didn't have all these newfangled things like TV on demand, and I didn't have a DVR. So anyway, I had to pick one show. I'm not bitter at all. I had to pick one show a week. And so during this time in my life, the one show that I picked per week it's called House. And if you've never seen House, here's a summary. It's about a very, very mean medical genius. I mean, that's it. And really the question is he ever going to not be mean? And I'll save you like 8 seasons? No, he stays mean and selfish the entire thing. And the idea is that he's so smart, he's so good at his job that he gets away with being mean. And he's so smart that he can always say exactly what he wants to say. And he's always putting people down. So Andrea would come in and watch it with me, and she'd say sometimes she'd sit down and say, I don't like House. And I'd be like, the show? You don't like the show? And she'd, no, the medical stuff is interesting. He's just so mean. And I was like, yeah, he is. That was his whole character. And the problem with it is he was a bit of a hero. And sometimes we might even say the word anti-hero, like, well, they're not supposed to be a hero, but they are a hero. And I've heard people say that. I wish I could be like Dr. House. I wish that I could say exactly what I want to say to someone and just kind of cut them down the smartest, quickest, most able way that I possibly could. Just get that zinger in. And I think to a certain extent, we're tempted by that possibility. And I think the reason is we would make us feel powerful if we could do that. It's the thought that we're actually better than others. See, House had this excuse. He felt entitled to be cruel because he was so much smarter than everyone else. We might do that. We might feel entitled to be rude because we're wealthier than someone else. We might feel entitled to be dismissive because we're more popular than someone else. One of the biggest lies in our society is that popularity and popularity contests end at high school. They don't. And If we think that someone is not important enough or not cool enough, it's very easy for us to be dismissive of them. And it's a lie that we tell ourselves. We believe, and I've heard this before, at least I'm not saying that everyone believes this, but there's this idea in our society that someone like House is quote unquote free. Why? Because he just doesn't care. So I don't give a care, I don't give a darn. Or fill in your expletive. That's often stated very, very crassly. That you care so little about what other people think that you're going to say what you want to say. And we believe sometimes that someone who always says whatever they want to, regardless of the effect it has on somebody, well, they're free. And the problem with that, the reason it's a lie, I mean, again, you see it a little bit in a fictional character like House because he chose misery. He ended up with a miserable life because he never did learn to care about other people. But that's really the secret. I think if we're going to learn how to be kind, there's two things that we have to focus on. And one of those is we have to care. We have to care about others. There's no skirting that. Otherwise, it's false kindness. Otherwise, it's fake niceness. We're smiling outwardly, but inside we're terrible to other people. We have to care about others in order to be kind. If you cannot care about others, it is impossible to be kind. In the book of Genesis, you have someone named Joseph. And Joseph's dad was very clear that he loved Joseph more than all of Joseph's brothers. And the Bible says that in Genesis 37. It says, when they realized that their father loved Joseph more than any of them, it says they hated him. And I find this interesting. It says they could not speak a kind word to him. Because what was in their heart, that anger, that seething resentment, it would not allow even a kind word to be said, because definitely there was no kind thoughts. It has to start here. You have to learn how to care for people in order to show kindness. My mentor was always fond of saying, passion for God will result in compassion for people. In other words, if Jesus says the most important commandment is to love God with all our heart and our soul and mind and strength, and the second is to love our neighbor like ourselves, I don't think we can love our neighbor like ourselves until we learn how to love God more. And the more we love God, the more we become like him, and the more he enables us to be kind to everybody. Now, you might stop and think, well, not everyone deserves my kindness. Not everyone deserves kindness from me. And I have that feeling too. There are people that I don't, can we be honest this morning? There's people I don't want to be kind to. I could think of 3 off the top of my head. People that I don't like. It's none of you, don't worry. People I don't like and I'd rather not be kind. Usually it's because they've been unkind to me, or even worse, unkind to someone else that I care about. And so we think they don't deserve it. But we run into trouble, don't we? Because none of us deserve God's kindness that he has shown all of our life. And this is the difference. See, Jesus talks about this. Everyone in the whole world is going to be nice to someone who's nice to you. Everyone's going to be good to someone who's good to you, and hate someone who's bad to you. Jesus said there's a different way, and this is God's way, and it's based on the nature of who God is. So the reason God's Spirit in us produces different fruit, it's different than natural fruit, it's different than the rest of the world, is because we start to become like him. And this is who God is. Luke 6:35. This is the reasoning that Luke gives us for the reason we have to be good to our enemies. So you've heard this before. Love your enemies and do good to them. He continues, he says, do good to them and give without expecting anything in return. He says, if you do this, you will be children of the Most High. In other words, you will look like your dad. You will look a lot like your Father in heaven, because this is who God is. He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. We use this verse a lot when we raise teenagers. Our kids tend to be very ungrateful for all the things we do. I'm waiting for that call. I've told my kids, you're going to be like 30 years old, and you're going to call me up and you say, Dad, you were right about everything, and I'm so grateful for everything you've given me my whole life. But that's the deal. Our God is kind even to the ungrateful, but not just the ungrateful, not just someone who has a bad attitude. He is kind to the wicked. He is kind to the just. He is kind to the unjust. He was kind to you before you met him, before you fully understood the kindness that he's given you. He is always kind to people who do not deserve his kindness. That is the God we serve. And when his Spirit is inside of us, that's the kind of fruit that he produces inside of us. It almost blows our own mind. It almost is unexpected in us, this kind of compassion for people who don't deserve it, the same way that you didn't deserve God before you met him. When God talks about himself, Jeremiah 31, he's talking to the people of Israel. He says, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with unfailing kindness. Did they deserve it? Absolutely not. Read the Bible up to Jeremiah 31. They did not deserve the kindness of God, and yet he continued to show it. I don't have time to go through like the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth is built on this idea of kindness. The Hebraic word is chesed, and in some translations it's loving kindness. And that means kindness that is over and above any expectation or any responsibility someone might have. An over and above kindness. And this is who God is. He goes over and above whether you deserve it or not. Whether someone deserves your kindness or not is not up to you. Your decision is to be kind to people, even to the undeserving, especially if God's Holy Spirit lives in you. And that leads us to the second thing. The second thing we need to do, not only do we need to care about others, we then need to learn to care for others. We move from motivation to our words and our actions. I'm always tickled when someone writes something online and they say, I'm going through this, and someone says, I'm sending you love, or I'm sending you love and kind thought. I know what they're saying, right? I'm thinking kindly about you, but some of them mean it literally. I'm sending you love. And I always want to say, oh, I felt it. No, I didn't. I didn't feel it. Sometimes kindness is cheap. Kind words are very cheap. We have to get to the point where this is where kindness and niceness are differentiated. Niceness just means you say nice things to people. You give compliments, you encourage. That's all good. That's a part of kindness. But kindness is always substantive. You're going to do something for someone. And usually if it's God's kindness, it tends to be over and above any responsibility you might have. So when we're being kind and when we're caring for others, it's usually because we have the resource or ability to care for them often in a time of need. So here's what I mean. Often, to really truly show kindness, there is an inequity of resource or position. And I'll explain that in a second. I'm talking about kindness that is shown to someone who in some way has less than you or has a lower position. So let's flip it for a second. You will always be nice to your boss, right? You really don't have a choice. I laugh at every joke Pastor Mark says. However, the good thing for me is that he's actually funny. He's very funny, so I can laugh at him. However, if he wasn't funny, I'd probably still laugh at every joke he says. Why? Because that dude signs the front of my paycheck. And that's the case, isn't it? I can be kind to my boss. I can be encouraging to him. I can be helpful. I can be valuable. Probably the most kind thing I can do, the best thing I can do for my boss is to do a good job, right? And I've encouraged him and we've had good conversations. He's done me the honor of accepting kindness from me. But we've all had a boss who doesn't feel the need, where he or she doesn't feel the need to be kind to their employees because they don't have to be. There is an inequity of position. So if you ever find yourself where your position is superior to the position of someone else, or the amount of resource you have is more than another person, that's where you can truly show kindness. Just like God, who has unlimited resource, who is the superior being of all the universe, has stooped down and held you in his arms. Compared to God, all of us are nobodies. And if we learn how to literally care for others out of our abundance of resource that God has blessed us with, we are then being more and more like God. So Luke 14, Jesus talks about this. He says, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers and sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they might invite you back, and so you're repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. He's not just talking about disability. In that culture, disability, there was no access for work. So if you were disabled, you were poor. So the crippled, the lame, the blind, and then you will be blessed, because although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. He is waiting for the chance to pay you back the credit that you receive when you're kind to those who can give nothing in return. Okay, let's just make this applicable. Are you kind to the people who serve you at the bank? Are you kind to someone who takes your order at a restaurant? Are you kind to kids, or are they just automatically annoying to you? You see, there's an inequity of position. There's definitely an inequity of resource. And that's where true kindness shines through. I have a friend, a couple, Jim and Lori Adams. They're the godparents of my boys. And they've just been amazing my whole life. And here's what I love, particularly about Lori Adams. Both of them are capable of doing this, but Lori definitely. Anytime you talk to them, and they're busy people. Okay, he eventually became the president of my alma mater. So very busy, very well respected. He's always been well respected in education circles. But he's always been Jim. He will always take the time to talk to you. And when you talk to Jim and Lori, it's as if during that conversation you are the most important person in the world. Have you ever met people like that? I love people like that. I wish I was able to do that the way that others are able to do it. Because and it's been even more impressive as they've become more and more respected in their circles, that they're somebody. And I'm used to being a nobody. And when you're somebody and you welcome in a nobody and you treat them special, you are showing the kindness of God. You are caring for other people. This is God's kindness. Whether we deserve it or not, he gives it. Whether we are important or not, he shows it. There's a song by a group called Delirious. They were a big Christian group in the late 90s. There's a song I love called King or Cripple. And the line from that song that always stands out to me, he says, "King or cripple, they were the same to you." God was not a respecter of persons. He says later, you take a broken person, you take the cripple, and you treat them like a king. That's the kindness of God. That's the real kindness he's trying to grow in our heart. Living like this is not easy. It is not. It's a discipline. It takes work. But that's the whole point of Galatians 5. Galatians 5 earlier says, since we live by the Spirit, let's keep in step with the Spirit. I always think of my son, my youngest, when he was really, really small. And I'd have his hand and we'd be walking and he's walking like this, and every so often he'd kind of trip, he'd kind of fall because he's tiny, and I guess I should have slowed down, but I didn't. I'm holding his and he's holding my arm, right? And he'd kind of trip. And I think every so often he'd fly a little bit, but he was learning how to keep in step with someone stronger. And that's what we're doing. God's Spirit, God's moving in this direction. And the challenge is to learn how to take that resource from God, how to learn from his Spirit and keep in step, live life the way that God does. It's not easy. It takes work. But with God's help, you can learn to live like him. With God's Spirit in you, he will produce this different fruit. So I encourage you, I challenge you to learn how to be kind the way God has always been kind to you and me, whether we've deserved it or not. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for your unfailing kindness, your loving kindness, your over and above generosity, your over and above giving of your resource and your Spirit and your power and your encouragement. I pray, Lord, as we grow closer and closer to you, that passion for you will develop into compassion for all people, not just your people, all people, whether they are wicked, whether they are ungrateful. Your kindness, we will mimic the kindness that you have shown to us. We will be imitators of God as dearly loved children. Please, make us more like you. This is not natural for us. It is not easy for us, but I'm excited about the possibility as I grow in you. I pray for every single person here. I pray that none of them feel guilty right now, that none of them feel angry at themselves. We accept your kindness and we accept the fact that you will continue to help us to show kindness to others. I pray that we never think of ourselves more highly than we ought and thus are dismissive of people who we feel are in a lower position, because that's not what you do at all. Thank you for treating us as somebody, as important even when we're not important, and help us do the same. In Jesus' holy, amazing, powerful name, amen. Thank you very much, church. We're glad that you joined us today. You can listen to our live Sunday podcast as well if you'd like, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media. We'll see you soon.